For all you body guys out there, don't beat me up in the comments. This is getting done on the cheap, in the garage, on a 200,000 mile Jeep, without having to take it back down to Parametal and without having to have somebody else redo it. This is just what can I do in the short term to make this thing right. So don't beat me up. Suggestions are good, but don't beat me up. Alright, here we go. We're digging into the Jeep. The project was bigger than I thought, but smaller than I thought, if that makes sense. I really was dreading it. What I was dreading was I took the Jeep apart. The Jeep was prepped, painted, put back together. Taking it back apart again just really wasn't on my radar of things to do. Work-wise, it wasn't bad. They'd take it apart, couple days to fix the paint, put it back together. Am I happy with it? I am now. I'm gonna see how well this lasts. I want to get this in the rain and the moisture for a few days and see what happens. Make sure this is gonna hold up and not rust. Make sure I'm not chasing this anymore. Overall, this was an inexpensive paint job, and so I'm not too terribly upset, but there were areas where the prep work could have been a little better because I did have rust come through on panels where it shouldn't be coming through and on places that it should not have happened. On the fenders, what we found out, and I was calling BS on what the body guy was saying and where it was coming through until I took it apart and got to looking at it, and in fact until I even was editing this video, I started to see what he was seeing, and it all started to click and make sense. Where the tubes on the fenders and the flat stock steel is welded together, it's stitch welded, and there's areas where there's no weld and the moisture can get in between the two pieces of metal, and when it was made from the factory, the powder coating couldn't get in there to seal it. So had we never painted these fenders, this would have happened. I think this is an indicative problem that you're going to find with these inexpensive fenders that you get on the interweb. That said, had he brought that to my attention, had I been aware of that, I would have seam sealed the entire thing. I would have rust encapsulated paint over everything before I sent it to him. That way it had a good base and good protection so that it would not have happened in the first place. But when you look at the Jeep, it looks good. Blending with this Raptor liner is amazing with the paintbrush. You hardly notice it. In fact, the only place I can really see that I did it is where I had to put seam sealer on one of my seams, and that's perfectly smooth, and that looks different than where the Raptor liner is textured. All in all, I'm happy. Like I said, I want to get this out in the rain and the moisture and see how well it holds up. I'm curious to see how well this holds up on the Jeep. I found a couple of areas where the paint has chipped off. Easy touch up, easy fix. So I'm curious to see what the long term is with this. So I'll definitely do a follow-up in about a year or two and tell you what my thoughts were. But if you're going to Raptor line your Jeep, if you're going to paint your Jeep, if you're getting those inexpensive fenders from the interweb, go along those seams before you put them on the Jeep and get a good seam sealer. Don't use silicone. Go to a paint and body shop and get seam sealer and put that all on those edges and make sure that is seamed up really, really good, and use your rust encapsulator over your factory fender and your fender flare that you're putting on, just to make sure you don't have any rust issues, because that's what's really disheartening, is putting all the work in to prep, paint, make it look good, and then 2 weeks later it looks like crud because it's rusting. So follow along. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow. Leave some comments below. Have a good one. Here we are. Rear fenders are off. Rockers are off. Snorkel is off. And the front fenders are off. Now, again, what he is saying, what the body man is saying, is that this seam on the back side is where the moisture is coming from and causing the rust to come through on that edge there. This is the driver's fender, it's not as bad. But all down this leading edge here, I have got rust coming out big time. This seam that runs down the back is what's causing the rust trails right here at the bottom of the fender. Now, and this is the seam on the outside. So what I've got here is basically, it's rust inhibitor, highly recommended by a local body shop. What I'm hoping is that I can just paint this on and seal up some of these issues from the back side. Getting back into the troubled areas. I think if I ever have to do the seam sealer again, I came up with it while walking the dog this morning. I want to try taking a piece of vacuum line or fuel line or tubing and put it on the tip of the caulking gun, and that way I can take that tube and get right where I want it, and I'm not trying to sit there and get where the tip won't go, because that really sucked. It really made this a mess, and I've got a lot of cleanup work to do because of it. Well, to catch you up to where we're at here, cleaned up the underneath side of the fenders, and then used some 3M seam sealer to fill in the gaps that the body guy was saying was causing the rust to seep through all. Just finishing up some masking. While that's setting, I am good to paint here in a few minutes. Now, with this being on the bottom side of the fenders, if you look at a factory car, overspray is kind of normal, so I'm kind of expecting that and kind of masking that with that in mind. Alright, so again, this part of the fender sits on top of the factory fender. This was also painted with a rust inhibitor and then just rattle canned over. There's seam sealer along this edge. I'm not worried about this not matching the Jeep. You don't see it. In fact, this little edge here, I'm not that worried about because you don't see it. But this top edge here, that's in that realm of things you see. Obviously, you're going to see the white, so I'm going to clean that up. This plate was originally done in the green as well. I didn't like that because everything else in the fender was black. So I went ahead and paint over, or did the rust encapsulator on this. So to help prevent the rust. So that's what we're going to do. I'll move this other fender out of the way real quick. And even on these flat fenders, or the rear fender flares, if you look at them, again, this bottom edge right here didn't get painted. So that needs to be taken care of. This edge right here didn't get painted or painted very well. So we'll start where I'm probably most comfortable. This little edge where the marker light is. It was never painted originally. I used the rust encapsulator on the original fender flare here, trying to prevent rust. That's also on the bottom side of the flat fender. Same thing with the passenger side. I didn't touch these grind marks up because I'm going to have to re-weld that to the fender. And then this bracket right here, there's a big void between the body and the bracket that was never filled in, so I used epoxy and then that seam sealer and filled that all in, and then I just used the paintbrush with color match to go around it. So is it perfect? No, but from as far away as you are right now, or 3 foot away, you can't tell. So pretty happy with that. Hopefully the rest of this comes out pretty well. We masked along this edge that you saw on some of the other shots. We scuffed this leading edge up and then put the rust encapsulator on it and then went over it with green. I will say that the Raptor liner with the green, it's easy to touch up. I'm not noticing as in other cars where you'd see the touch-ups at all. As always, like, subscribe, follow. Have a blessed day.